Welcome to another episode of Code Breakers, the podcast that empowers you to overcome life's challenges and tap into your full potential. I'm Sam, your host. We have an exciting episode in store for you today. I have a special guest joining us to talk about the important topics of men's mental health and supporting loved ones dealing with PTSD. Please welcome my husband, Paul. I wanted to invite you on today because I think it's super important to get your perspective as somebody who has had to witness the things that I've gone through. So I have done 8 or 9 episodes so far, and I've talked about my experience. I've shared a little bit about what I went through, and I've talked about what it was like going through working while I was going through my healing process. I've given tips from my perspective, but I think it would be really valuable for a lot of people to get some insight from somebody who has had to witness somebody else going through this process. So I guess my first question for you would be, if you look back on our journey together and what you have learned about my story and my experience, and all the things that have transpired in the last, say, 5 years. What has that been like for you?
It's been a journey. I don't think either one of us really, when we first started dating, really understood the depths of what you were gonna have to peel back. I mean, I remember a conversation in the kitchen, you and I come back to, I don't know how many times, when you and I were first getting together and you were sitting on the kitchen counter and you said, you don't want any of this, like I'm too screwed up or whatever. And
Yeah.
I chuckled and I was like, oh, come on, whatever, like we can figure it all out. Well,
Yeah,
then,
I think you said something to the effect of everyone has their
yeah,
their
exactly,
baggage, which
exactly.
is true.
Yeah. But, well, I mean, you get a few years down the road and like you went through the flashback and everything that occurred and when we were in Olympia and that, that definitely opened my eyes to the level of trauma that you had gone through in your life, where I was inappropriately assuming you had baggage like everybody else,
Yeah.
a shitty mother or whatever, something not what you ended up, having to face. And so yeah, I mean, that was a pretty brutal realization of like, oh, this is going to be much more intense to fix and to have you work through and have you heal from. So honestly, the last say 5 years of that has really been me working through the realization of like how damaging that was, and
That
just
being my
the event, like what happened to you, it shaped everything. It shaped how you view the world, how you respond, like your defense mechanisms, your coping mechanisms, everything was literally framed around a continual traumatic experience for so many years while you were young.
yeah.
And so I've had to relearn how to engage because your perspective and the way that you handle things, interpret things is just, it's different because your life's experience is different. And so that's probably been the biggest realization for me is, I don't know, everybody goes through life and they assume their normal is normal. And I did. And I assumed I had a great family. I had, don't get me wrong, my parents had their challenges as well, but
Everyone does.
yeah. But I had a normal, relatively normal upbringing, I guess. And it's just hearing your stories and things like it rocked me in more ways than I can probably describe, because at first I handled it through sarcasm. In my view, it was humor, but it wasn't. It was just a shitty way of reconciling, you know, like, I don't know, issues or feelings or emotions that I wasn't comfortable, like actually processing or
Facing
having.
head
Yeah.
on
Yeah. And
without
so,
that shield of
yeah. And I mean,
being
that's just,
funny.
yeah. And
Yeah.
that's just me. And that's
Yeah.
just the way, I handle it.
But I think that's fine.
But it was offensive for you, right? So
Yeah.
that wasn't what you needed. And so I had to learn how to try to, even though I didn't understand it, and I'm still not good at it, right? I still work on that, like trying to listen and not solve, and
Yeah.
also just listen,
Yeah.
just to listen, right? Just to be quiet. And so I don't know. That's probably been like like I said, it's a journey. It's been 5 years of every time I think I kind of have something figured out or whatever, you continue to do research where I've never seen anyone in my life do the level of research and work on not only yourself, but for like propagation of information. How do you share this with the world and how do you push it? And so every day I learn something new. You and I, both talk and argue about that because it's a constant source of feedback from you.
Yeah.
It's like, in this space, I need something a little different, a little more, a little less, like whatever. And it's fine. But it's a learning
But it's
all the
also
time.
something I think I try to work on is not requesting you to like fit into this perfect box to make me feel better.
Oh yeah,
I
no,
think
no, that's not it at all. I don't take that at all like that. I take it as you're trying to educate me because I don't have your
my
lived and learned
experience.
experiences.
Yeah.
And so I can't possibly understand, or like everybody has, should have empathy, but like I can't properly, I don't know if console is the right word, but I can't properly engage with you if I don't really understand not only the event, but like how are you seeing it? How are you framing it?
What's
What's your
my
reference?
perspective?
Yeah. And if I don't have that, like I just sit here like an asshole and just nod, okay, whatever. And I'll be honest with you, because I didn't understand for the first 2 or 3 years we were dating and together, like that's more or less what I did. Okay, whatever. Like, sure, that's a messed up story. Don't want to. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And just kind of try to move past it. And I think what you've shown me in the last few years is like, and I even learned this through the therapist that I was talking to when I was going through all my stuff. How we compose our methods of like healing, if you want to call it that, is different for everybody.
Yeah.
And so some people can look at an event and it's traumatic or it's painful, sad, whatever, and they can very quickly process it and get to the other side of it and say, like,
That sucked.
I understand what happened, I understand what went down, and here's how I reconciled it in my head, move on.
Moving on.
And that's kind of, I assumed that you had the ability to do that. Like I thought that method in me was normal for all of humanity.
Well, I think this is a really important point, actually, because I think that I did do that. Um, and now I look back in retrospect and I feel like it was just out of pure survival. But I do feel like I kind of looked at my life when I was 15, 16, I looked back at my life and I was like, yeah, that was pretty fucked up, but I'm going to do something different. So I just kind of picked the pieces up and carried on. And that worked for me up until that flashback, which that I think was the really pivotal moment in my journey over the last 5 years. And it changed everything about how I think you were engaging with me, which I think was something else you just mentioned. As you started to learn more about my story, you realized that you had to engage with me a little bit differently. And I wonder how much that night, because do you remember that night the way that I remember that night?
Yes,
Like,
vividly.
yeah. So I wonder how much that night changed your perspective of what I was going through as well. Because when we were dating and I was telling you stories about what I had gone through and we were kind of just trying to get to know each other, and I was really hesitant to share information with you because I had never really gone into those aspects of my life before. I could see the shock in your face and I could see kind of the like, what? Like, that just discombobulation from my normal isn't everyone else's normal.
Yeah, like, well, and I mean, I think I wore that I wore that response a lot with you when we first got together because like it was very disorienting to have, you know, having been married previously and, you know, like seeing family dynamics that were outside of mine and still have them be relatively normal. Like
Yeah.
there's a good interaction, there's, positive family connections, and like there's just not, I mean, there always drama.
Reasonable
It's always, yeah,
communication.
it's
Yeah.
always drama or whatever because it's family. But like there was healthy love and affection and things like that. And so to hear as you kind of bled into these stories and to hear them, like every time you said something, and we joke about it, right? Like it's patented. We got your trademark, stories from the dark farm. I mean, every time you said something, it would be a little bit more like, oh my God, like you can't be serious. And internally, that's the monologue. And then my response would be like, you realize that's not normal.
Yeah.
And so finally, after saying that enough times, and then you had the flashback, and that's when it was like, okay, like we need to seek some kind of professional guidance because like I've heard enough of the anecdotal stories about things that had gone on in your childhood and shit that were just really messed up, and you had kind of chalked it up to, well, everybody has a different growing up experience, whatever. And I'm sitting on the other side going, holy fuck, no, that's not at all. And then when you had the flashback, that was it. Like that
Yeah.
for me, that was like that watershed moment of like, like this is so far beyond your personal capability to fix without assistance
Yeah.
because there's so much more there that you needed to go and seek help, and then that help led to you educating yourself and you educating me, and it just led to this massive, like, there's no better word than education and knowledge, transformation, because that's what it was. It sucks because I'm infinitely smarter about all of this stuff now than I was, say, 5, 6, 7 years ago. But that's at your expense, right? It's you had to go through your healing journey. And as part of that, it was watching you, which has been, I mean, honestly, it's been pretty cool to watch because we were talking about this the other day. Like, you need to go get your PhD. You really do. Because like I think about like as I was going after, grad degrees and stuff, like all the research that went into all of that, like that, and you're doing it for all the right reasons because it's something you're passionate about and something that you care intimately about and you want to share with the world. There is no better source of energy for you to go and accomplish that next feat. And so like that's, if there's any real good that comes out of this, not only is it your healing journey, but I think it really has put you on a tremendous vector scholastically, like finishing what you talked about being
Yeah.
a dream. Like,
Yeah.
right when we first got together,
Yeah.
you made that mention of like, someday before I retire, that's, I would like to, I don't
I
think it's
said that's my
someday.
retirement plan.
Yeah, I don't think it's someday.
Yeah.
I think you're in the midst of it. And I think it's just a matter of, you finding the right institution, and allowing everything that you've done to be moved into that space.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's,
Yeah, do you remember? Actually, I was already going to therapy, and the person that I went to go to EMDR was my second therapist at that time. So all of a sudden I went from no therapy to having two therapists like once a week.
Yep.
And obviously that may have been a bit of an overload, but it certainly opened up that memory,
Yeah.
which, as painful as it was, as shocking as it was, it really answered that unknown kind of gut instinct that I had about my experience growing up and the fact that there was more there that I just didn't consciously remember. And once I had that flashback, I think that's what sent me on kind of a expedition, if you will, to like make sense of what happened and try to hold the people accountable that I could, which probably will never, come to fruition. But that's why I've decided that this is the best way I can utilize what happened to me, what I've learned along the way, and instead of just letting that kind of eat at me, use it for good in some way.
Yeah, you've definitely done a better job of that than me, because I would just assume choke out every son of a bitch that was involved. Like, and I can't let that go. It's very tough for me. And so watching you put your energy instead of into, I'm not gonna say like vengeance, but like revenge.
Being angry.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
you've managed to. I mean, you are. I see it in you from time to time. You get pissed off when you think about like the fact that you know like horrible decisions and horrible actions have led to your daughter not having a family dynamic, at least with that half of the family, that you probably would have liked to have had. And it's
Yeah.
because she'll never know that side of the family because of all the crap that no one wants to raise up, and
And
admit
take,
to.
yeah,
Yeah.
own up to. Yeah.
I mean, you've taught me, about, like, I can't say that I've gotten to the same place as you, in that I can't say you've forgiven him because I don't believe you have. I really don't. I don't. I believe you have, like, you put that like pin in it and said, I'm gonna move in a different path
Yeah.
to heal.
I've gotten to the point where I've realized that I can't make them see the things that they did wrong for what it is.
Right.
Because they don't see it that way. They have created a story in their own minds that says what I did was the right thing. And so I was collateral damage in them protecting themselves.
Yeah.
And I I think what I realized was that getting answers and having the internal knowledge and really getting back to a place where I could trust myself again was what I really needed.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think you're right there. I think, and I watched a shift in you. So, sitting here as on the side as your partner, what kind of watching this all kind of unfurl. I watched a shift in your dynamics when you got the paperwork from the state.
Yeah.
Like when you went through that and you read and everything that you had experienced through the flashback and everything else, all these things that you had just enough
Intrinsically new.
picture of in your head, but you couldn't trust whether or not did they happen, did they not, like whatever. Everything that you got back from CPS said bang right in front of you, and like all the stars aligned, and it absolutely like galvanized, and so that helped. Like, so from being somebody that's going through the journey with you, that helped me because it felt like it grounded you, and it's
Okay.
like I watched you trust yourself. Like, yes, like I'm not making this shit up. Like it did, something happened, and so that it helped me understand the gravity again,
Yeah.
because all it did was reiterate like you're telling these kind of weird stories when we're getting together, and like then you have the flashback and everything, but then a couple years later all of this information shows up, and I it took a lot for me not to ask you to like read that file. I didn't want to, because I to this day
You haven't. Still to
no,
this day, you haven't
I
seen it,
I
right?
don't I don't want to,
Yeah.
for a variety of reasons. Knowing myself well enough, no good will come from me going through any of that information. Like, and I know that, and so that was a tough one for me, because like we tend to talk about toxic masculinity and all this.
Yeah.
Like, that's one of those things. Is like, I'm born and raised, and I love my dad. I'm born and raised to protect and provide for a family. Period. End of
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
And so, to watch you be suffering with something, and then to have, I don't know, proof is the right word, but documentation showing that there are, and even as we sit here today, there's 2 or 3 assholes out there that we know are responsible for allowing this stuff to occur, and they're just watching the world go by.
Yeah.
And nothing aggravates me more than that. But
Yeah.
I don't help you, and it's taken me a long time and it's just taken me getting older, honestly, to recognize that my way to help you is not going out and doing anything stupid. It is just trying to help you navigate what your new reality is and what it looks like.
And if I stop and think about it, I could spin myself into a pit of despair and anger for sure. But I think one of the things that I think is really important for you to know is that when it comes to this whole protect and provide thing, you have done that in just a very different way than going and kicking somebody's ass because they hurt me, right? Like that's a very primitive kind of toxic masculine perspective. But you have protected and provided for me by giving me the space to heal, by letting me go through my process without forcing your opinions or perspectives or beliefs on how I should be going through it. And you've given me and Oakley like an incredible life, and you've given me the space to learn, grow, and evolve through some of the darkest, worst like things you can imagine, anyone could imagine. And I don't know any better example of healthy masculinity than that.
I get. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but
You're gonna Nick Miller me right now, aren't you?
yeah, a little bit, but I don't like. I hear what you're saying, and I think it's been better probably in the last year or so, because like I've actually, I don't know, there's been a shift in, I don't know, I don't know what it is. It's just there's been a shift with my ability to like honestly just try to be a shock absorber instead of trying to solve, because the very nature of not just men but just me as a person is to like solve. Like if there's a problem, like how do I help, what do I got to do to help
Yeah.
you get to the other side of it.
Yeah.
And so like I don't believe that I did a great job in these probably first shit, at least the first 3 to 4 years we were together, of providing that safe space. I mean, what I think I did was I tried to kick you over to a therapist. It was like, hey, this is way beyond me.
But
I
that's,
have no idea how to even talk to you about this shit. Like when you brought up
I think that's
the
fair though.
flashback, I know,
The
but
flash,
like
I was in therapy when I had the
yeah,
flashback.
I know. That's what I mean. But it's like that, like you came and you were talking about it, and like it was complete. So, as your partner, to have that information revealed, like that was completely overwhelming to me, and it was
Mhm.
completely demoralizing.
Oh,
Like to have to know that you had to go through that, and then that's just coupled on all the other crap that happened through your childhood. Like it was like damn, I should have at that point I should have sought help, from
for
like,
yourself.
yeah, because I couldn't process that. Like I genuinely did. It took me 2 years to actually like basically get to a point of a reconciliation with like that really happened. Like it,
Did the paperwork from the state help you too in that
no,
way?
no, because I always believed you. I knew it happened, but it was like internally. Like again, everybody has coping mechanisms, and so mine is like I heard you, I listened to you, you are working through your process. Peace out. And
You've got this kind of thing.
yeah, and that didn't solve what I was struggling with. And so the reality is like there was still a lot more damage done after you released that information to me, because
Damage done in
like that's a heavy weight to bear to have
between us or for you directly.
both.
Yeah.
So that's a great question. So actually it was both. So I felt like I felt a tremendous amount of weight brought on me with the knowledge of that information, because you it's I don't even know how to describe it. It's like being you get this massive like, oh my lord, holy crap, information dump, and you can do nothing with it. Like nothing.
And
So
as
you
a
just have to
protector
sit
and
and stew with
provider,
it. Yeah.
yeah.
And it's like, so well, great. I mean, I'll go back to my favorite movie, Tommy Boy, right? Great, you've identified it. Step two is washing it off.
Yeah.
Like I can't help you in any way, shape, or form, and so I just have to sit and marinate in that. And so that was, I mean, that's always been tough. It's still tough to this day. Like there's nothing I can do. So what I've tried to do is, and it's taken me a long time to figure out how to find a way to help that's not invasive. It's what you just mentioned earlier. It's trying to sit back and allow you the time and space to like go through your process, whatever that process is. It's starting this. It's doing, trying to help others. I mean, that's always been your thing. You've always, talked about that. And now I think you've found a place to use your voice.
Yeah.
And so watching you step into that, it's been fun, but it's also for me, watching you go through a cathartic release has been very cathartic for me, because I'm watching you not only do what you want to do, but do what you need to do, and like put that energy out, put it out in the world, like let it go. Like the more you talk about it, the more you help others, and the more you see that impact, I fundamentally believe that will alter how you look at and reference the world.
Yeah.
And I've watched it happen the last couple of years, and it's only now, I think it's only going to get better. And so, yeah, I mean, as somebody who's kind of been sitting on the sidelines through this, last 4 or 5 years of you doing it, I mean, I'm in a different place today than I was 7 or 8 years ago, and that's all because of education. Like you send me notes all the time. Like that's something. So if you're looking for, one of your viewers like watching this, and you're trying to offer them some kind of guidance or assistance to their partners who may be
Yes.
trying to go through this, like the one thing I would offer is like it's a really cool tip that you started doing years ago that I didn't pay attention to, and it was the dropping of information. Like first I took offense to it. It's like, look, I'm not a dumbass. Like I heard what you said.
Yeah.
I heard the verbiage that you use, whatever. And a lot of times, like I'll be honest with you, I was pretty good about it. I would go and look stuff up. You didn't think I did, but I did. And it was more of a, it wasn't seek to understand. It was like defensive mechanisms. Like I don't
Is
want to
what
be
I'm.
caught. Yeah, I don't want to be caught in a conversation with you and be completely stupid in that space because I just don't know what you're talking about. And so when you would drop random things, I would go and look it up more as a, I want to be able to have an intelligent intellectual conversation with you in this space and not just sit here and bob and weave, right? Like that
Yeah.
just it didn't. So that was it was a that was actually a personal thing for me. I just wanted to be able to engage
Education.
properly.
Yeah.
But then it became more of the deeper you went in this, the more it became interesting and it actually became something that was useful for me, not just to have a dialogue with you, but for me to do self-reflection. Like, okay, so if this is how, you know, her frame of reference looks, and these are the things that are, you know, I'm triggering is not the right word,
Well, yeah,
but
but
if these are the
they have
things,
a response. It
yeah,
has an effect.
and if those are the then what do I do, or how do I help to minimize those, avoid them, like whatever, but still be heard? Because
Yeah.
I tell you, we went through a point there. You know, I mean, it's much better
Arizona.
today.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. Like I think the time in Arizona, I didn't feel heard at all, and I for two reasons. A, I you were going through your process. I didn't fully recognize how much, you know, that was going to involve you, and like how just how much
It
energy
consumed everything.
it did.
Yeah.
100%. And I understand that more now today than I did back then.
But that
But
doesn't make it right.
I didn't take, I don't even know how to explain it. I didn't take the time to figure out how to better communicate what I was needing, wanting, like whatever.
Mm.
And so I just honestly got frustrated and just did not feel heard. And so, you know, it's different today. I mean, I still have that. You and I get into those tiffs every now and then about where, like, you know, I don't feel like you're hearing what I'm saying
Yeah.
because you have a perspective. And the beauty of you finding your voice is like you found your voice, and it's a great thing. But it's also for folks who go through this type of a journey, their partner can get it's very easy to get frustrated because it absolutely can quiet the partner who's trying to raise their hand and saying, hey, like I don't feel like this is working for me either, in whatever that dynamic is.
Yeah.
And so you and I have had those conversations multiple times over the last couple of years of like, we had a miss on communication, we did whatever, like and we usually circle back to I do not feel, I'm blowing the
Yeah.
tea, right? I do not feel like you're hearing me right now because this is what I'm actually trying to say, not your interpretation of it. And so there it's good and bad to watch you go through the journey. It's really good because I feel like you're taking your power back. You're like, if it, I just watch, it's so strange to say that about, you know, a 30-year-old woman, like, but I'm watching you become this woman, and it feels like you've, I don't know, it just feels like a transformation, a butterfly, like just watching you just do something different, become something different.
Yeah.
And it's awesome. Like I'm impressed every day by it, but there's also growing pains with
Yep.
that because when you have a relationship prior to the healing journey, the norms, the expectations, or whatever you want to call that, um, you have to be willing to shift those
Yeah.
because your communication profiles change, like all of it changed.
Yeah.
And so it's not bad, like at all. I'm not saying at all. It's you just have to be willing to move. And like that's for me, like for the first 3 or 4 years we were together, like everything else in my life, I wasn't willing to move. I moved everybody else. That's just how my nature's always been. And so I don't know, you taught me, you know, a better way. And that's somebody's gotta want to do that. Like, you know, you ask about what advice would you give to others or whatever going through this.
Yeah.
You gotta want to do that.
As the partner,
Yes.
or you
But well,
gotta you
both.
you have to want to like put in the effort, or what? Like
Yeah, 100%. Like it, like
for the other person to go through whatever they're gonna have to go
yeah,
through. I
because
think one of the things you said that's really important too is being willing to get help for yourself, because bad on me, but like absolutely the things I was dealing with are very heavy. And you were my person, and you were the first person I ever came to or like divulged this information to. So you became my safe space outside of therapy. And I don't think I recognized just how heavy dumping those things on you could be.
And I didn't realize either, right? Like, I mean,
Because
just
you
didn't.
wanted to be there for me,
Yeah,
right? Like you
like
wanted to be part of it.
like you said, I'm your human, you're my human. That's that. Like that's what you're supposed to do. But
Yeah,
like, there is no human, like outside of professionally trained therapists and psychologists that are prepared to deal with the information that like trauma survivors hold. Like
yeah.
your average person, like you're just not geared
That
to.
hasn't gone through
Yeah,
like immense trauma.
and what
Yeah,
and I wouldn't even say immense trauma. I would say that trauma because we've all had traumatic events. We've all had, you know, some type of extended well, not I can't say we all have, but many of us have had extended, exposures to trauma and things like that. But they're very different and depending on your lived experiences prior to the event,
exactly.
how you process that is completely different. And so like for me, I've been able, like I said, to because of a fairly, I guess, quote, normal upbringing. Like I had, I don't know, full faculties to be able to process, trauma and stuff as it came to me through my life, and I was able to pretty quickly like reconcile things and move and just move past it. And people would view that as you're just stoic, you're just an asshole, like you just kind of walk down the street, and it's like yeah, that's not the case. It's not like I don't feel something, I just don't look at
Stay
it
there.
as
Yeah.
that's exactly it. It's like it's not like I don't go home and be like, God damn, that sucked. But 8, 10 hours later after I wake up, I have processed that and recognized, okay, what do I gotta do today to be better than yesterday?
Yeah.
And then like just start moving down the road.
And I think the benefit of that, or like the luxury of that, that you probably haven't realized before, is the privilege that exists when you don't have like a chemical imbalance in the
Right.
brain. Because a lot of people deal with that, have no control over it, and their brain just works very differently. They don't get to go to sleep one night and wake up the next feeling better. But then on the other side of that, like what I went through, I didn't have that foundation that said life is safe, people
Right.
care for you, and this isn't like terror and trauma and chaos and all that stuff isn't normal.
And that took me a long time to really understand and appreciate about your circumstance because it wasn't my lived experience. Like my truth and what my norm was not yours. And I had to somehow find what your reference point was. And there's no way that I possibly could without you guiding me kind of through not just your incidents, but like the education that you were going
The
through, the
process I was
information. Yeah.
trying to go
Like
through.
if I, yeah. And so you kept giving me information and it allowed me to formulate my own new truth.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And so like it was different, but I remember that was probably about 2 years ago. I remember having this weird epiphany of thinking about
Mm.
that thing with Julie and how impactful that was.
Yeah.
And so I see you doing the same thing. Like you want to educate, you want to put this information out there and help others both seek a path to recovery and healing, but also like what is their blast radius? Like how do they
Yeah.
affect those around them?
That is so important.
Right.
Like, I mean, we're starting here with the partnership conversation, but I think my last episode talks about leadership, which is another thing that
Started on leadership. Watching you and your journey through with Amazon, what a goddamn disaster. Like it's amazing to me how long you stayed with that company because of how shitty of leadership that I've seen you be exposed to. It
and
is stunning.
but the way I think about it is a couple things. Like, A, my childhood and my life prior to Amazon was all about chaos. So joining Amazon, chaos is
Yeah, it
very
fits.
familiar. One of my biggest strengths is creating order out of chaos. So Amazon worked for me for a really long time. And I've always had a passion for good leadership. my experiences at Amazon have given me a lot of examples of I've had some good examples, good leaders in the past, but I also have fantastic examples of
Oh
what
yeah.
not to
But
do.
what not to, yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for the experience. And like we were just talking about last night or whatever, like I can't be upset about it too much because Amazon fundamentally changed my life.
Yeah.
I mean, it brought us together. We were talking last night about how I paid off $50,000 in student loans in one payment. Like, so much like my upbringing, I've gotten to the point where, and people will push back on this and say it's toxic positivity. It is toxic positivity if you don't allow yourself to go through the messy shit in the middle. But I absolutely have gotten to a point where I believe that the things I went through as a child and even the things I went through at Amazon have all led me to exactly where I'm supposed to be and have given me a perspective and a lot of empathy for people who are going through difficulties in their life or trying to navigate getting from point A to point B and they're struggling with that.
Yeah. And again, it comes back to, I think your journey has led you to a point of being able to, like I said, not forgive, but accept. Like this
Yeah,
is what's
I think that's
happened.
a better word.
This is where we're at. This is kind of, and I'm not that good of a person. I'm just not. I look at what you went through, and again, I just pimp slap every one of them. Like it's just ridiculous. Like the shit that you had to suffer through, and like I don't know. It's one of those like yes, I guess technically we're better for it because Amazon paid us a bunch of money, whatever. And like okay, great, but like there's still the thing that bothers me the most about all of it is that these assholes are still out there and they're still affecting other people. They're
Yeah.
affecting other women. They're affecting folks that are going to come into the workforce long after you, and that, like, to your point, there's toxic traits that are going to continue to be, pushed through and disseminated across that organization and eventually outside of that organization because no one's taking these assholes to task. And that's the problem that I see probably more than anything, more than how it affected you directly or anything else. It's what I saw from the seat that I held, and you were just one of many that went through this.
Yep.
And you watched me, right? You sat beside me and helped me like navigate how
How
to
to be
be
in.
better in that space, right?
I think when you were leading the team at Amazon, like that's a prime example of the way that you stepped into your role as an ally. Not just because it was the right thing to do, but because you had like a different level of empathy and understanding because of the dynamic that you and I shared the years prior.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. But again, like no one listens unless it's directly affecting. And that's the thing that frustrates me the most is I don't personally, I always thought I was good in that space, but I learned like not being part of the problem isn't being part of the solution. That was a brutal realization because I knew, and I can say this unequivocally, wherever I've worked from, the last 30 years, I've never been part of that problem of like holding women back or not, pushing DEI through the organization because like I care about diversity of thought.
Yeah.
Like how do we drive, better in that space? And I don't
Which
care
leads
what that
naturally
looks
to
like.
general.
And exactly, if you chase that,
Yeah.
the other is a byproduct. It's
Yep.
an output. And so, yeah, but what I didn't realize was on the other side of that equation is just being good enough to not be part of the problem doesn't mean you're helping solve. And so you help me recognize that. And so how do you go and be more aggressive in that campaign to like make sure that we're doing the right things and we're not, alienating others or just creating spaces that just propagate middle-aged white dudes. Like it just drives me nuts. And so I don't know. It was very frustrating to watch you have to go through that. I did take some positives from it because I did. I used that as fuel for trying to fix my orgs and trying to do something different.
Yeah.
But no one no one ever bothered to try to help you, right? And so I don't know. That's still one of those things that it grates on me. I don't know. And so when you ask about like how to how do you help your partner as they go through this journey?
Yeah.
Um, God forbid, like your partner's working at the same place as you and you have to watch that shit. And I had to watch it from a seat that was one level up above yours, right? And
Yeah.
so, like, I had a very big seat at the table for a while, and just being completely helpless as a middle-aged white dude, not able to fix shit because organizational inertia said we're fucked up and we're going to stay this way.
Yep.
Okay, like
Yeah. And I think what you just said, though, about not being part of the problem doesn't mean you're part of the solution. Like, we just need to double down on that in every facet because all of us have privileges of some sort. There are plenty of people who can benefit from our allyship and our advocacy. And just saying I'm not part of the problem doesn't necessarily help us make progress as a society in whatever facet that might be: mental health, racial equity, like poverty elimination, all of that stuff.
it's it's been an interesting few years to watch, what you helped me learn, what you helped me go through, what you've learned, what you've gone through, and then trying to get like what I feel is almost a culmination point now where you're trying to basically share all of that with the world. Like, hey,
Yeah.
here's some really deep shit that, I learned and had to go through. And I appreciate the fact that you're trying to incorporate others because man, it takes a village. Like I'll be curious to see if you do one of these with Oakley and what Oakley's response
Uh,
is to it, right? And like, I mean,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'll be curious because I know for her, it's been very difficult to watch you, struggle with these things. And as you go through your process, some days are better than others, some hours are better than others. And it's a matter of when do you find your equalization point, like you go through your journaling, you go through your process and you just, like we have had to learn how to accept wherever you are on the continuum. Like, and that's a thing. Like, when you want to talk about what partners can do, it's acceptance. It is understanding, like, he, she, they will not be the same as they were when they started the journey. The person that you engage in that activity with is not going to be the person that comes out the other side. Good, bad, right, wrong, or indifferent. You're not the same person that you were 6, 7 years ago. You're just
Yeah.
not,
Well,
right?
I mean, what is that like for you?